Controversial and combative top Trump advisor Corey Lewandowski made the mistake of being interviewed by CNN's Jim Acosta, who had no time for Lewandowski's bad faith nonsense and gave a masterclass performance in shutting down MAGA lies on live TV. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, this is a masterclass performance by Jim Acosta, who got his claim to fame as a CNN White House press correspondent in the White House during the Trump administration. And he went viral multiple times, fact-checking Donald Trump and sparring with Donald Trump, being insulted by Donald Trump. And he was eventually rewarded, rightly so, with his own show on CNN. And Lewandowski is somebody we've covered in previous videos. He is a combative and controversial top Trump advisor whose primary motto with respect to Trump, at least during the 2016 Trump campaign, was let Trump be Trump. Donald, just do whatever your id tells you to do, whatever nasty impulse you have, just do it. That's how you're going to win people over. And that's probably why Donald Trump recalled him to his campaign orbit in 2024, because that's really what Trump wants to hear. He doesn't want to hear the polished advice of Chris LaCivita and others. He just wants to hear, let me do whatever the hell I want, which is Corey Lewandowski's MO. So what we have here is kind of the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. We'll see who is who. But again, I think it's a masterclass performance by Jim Acosta. We're going to play these clips and unpack them together.
Let's get right into this. Last night, Senator Vance refused to answer whether Trump lost the 2020 election. Let's listen to that.
I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Yeah, Corey, why is this so difficult for the Trump campaign to answer? I mean, it's 2024. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? Can you answer that?
Jim, I think it's very simple. The American people have passed the 2020 election. They're focused on an election which is just under 5 weeks away. And what we have an opportunity to do now is to talk about two different visions for America. And what J.D. Vance laid out last night is a very different vision than what Tim Walz and Kamala Harris want to say. So, look, we can go back and relitigate the 2020 election, or we can look at what we can do to make America better for the everyday Americans who are struggling under Bidenomics.
Yeah,
They're struggling
Corey,
under...
It's not relitigating. It's just a simple question. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? I mean, that's an easy
Jim,
one.
why are we talking about 2020 anymore? Does the American people care about the 2020 election anymore, or do they care about being able to put food on their table, gas in their car,
I
home
think
heating
one
oil
reason
in
why
their...
it's coming up, Corey, is because the former president has said on the campaign trail repeatedly that there was all this widespread fraud in 2020. That was not the case. And he's also teeing up the same kinds of challenges after this election. It hasn't even happened yet. So it is a very relevant
Jim, we
question.
know there was fraud. There's no question there was some fraud that took place in the 2020 election. There's no question about that.
No widespread fraud.
What does widespread mean, Jim? Is one vote that's illegal enough? Or how many do you determine is widespread? What is that number?
There were instances of voter fraud from Trump supporters. I mean, you know that from the 2020 campaign. But
and you're saying there was none on the other side, Jim?
I mean, I'm sure there was, but Corey, I mean, every expert, people from inside the Trump administration who have come out since then have said, no widespread voter fraud. And
but
I guess
what
the
does
question
widespread mean, Jim? Why
Corey,
are we focusing on 2024 is my question.
So I guess what you're saying is that Donald Trump did not lose the 2020 election. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is Joe Biden is the president of the United States. You recognize that, and I recognize that. But let's talk about
So a couple of things. I love the fact that Acosta, he was very smart there, basically weaponizing these notions of voter fraud against Lewandowski. We have verified instances of Trump supporters in 2020 committing voter fraud. So it's good to throw that in the face. Like, actually, we know that your people, your supporters have committed voter fraud. So if you really have a concern about that, are you going to call out your own supporters? Lewandowski has no response to that except to say, well, I mean, I'm sure Democrats committed voter fraud too. And indeed, I'm sure they did. The question is, was any voter fraud committed in 2020, which is outcome determinative, which would have changed the results of the 2020 election? And there is not only no evidence of that, there's evidence to the contrary, given there have been multiple recounts and audits at the forensic level in multiple states, and they expand President Biden's margin of victory. Almost all the recounts, to my knowledge, have actually increased the number of votes. They're like, yeah, actually, we miscounted votes that should have gone to Biden, and we miscounted them for Trump. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election freely and fairly. And this idea that, well, we can legitimately question the results of an election simply because there's voter fraud. Well, by that logic, there was voter fraud committed in 2016. It's not like there was literally no voter fraud committed in 2016 or 2012 or 2008 and so on and so forth. Voter fraud, instances of voter fraud have always existed. You can't make it perfect. There's voter fraud in every damn election in every democracy on earth. The question is it outcome determinative? And so by the logic that Trump supporters like Corey Lewandowski introduced to the equation, then I suppose we should have questioned whether Donald Trump was president of the United States. I suppose that Hillary Clinton should have tried to sue her way into the White House instead of formally conceding. I suppose that she should have worked with then Vice President Joe Biden and then outgoing Democratic President Obama to steal the election from Donald Trump. If that's the logic, at the end of the day, MAGA Republicans will lose this debate no matter what the parameters are, because even if we grant them the premise, they would never, ever, ever accept a Democrat doing what they did, right? That's how you know they're unprincipled hypocrites who should be made fun of. We'll continue.
The 2024 election, which is less than 5 weeks away, and let's look at the two visions for America.
Will Donald Trump honor the results of the 2024 election? Will he do that?
Jim, did Hillary Clinton honor the results? No. Did Democrats honor the results?
Yes, she did. She called and conceded the election. Corey,
Jim,
I was with you guys on election night in Manhattan.
She said the election was stolen. She said there was Russian interference. Members of this network said that the Steele dossier was true.
She called the then president-elect and conceded the election.
Jim, why are we talking hypotheticals? Why are we talking about the policy matters that matter to the American people?
I know, but Corey, it's a simple question.
That have poured across this country.
Will the former
Jim, why
president...
are we talking about the 13...
So again, so funny. Lewandowski tries to go with the Hillary Clinton example, and thank God Jim Acosta has just teed up on that. Guys, I was with you. Donald Trump received a personal phone call from Hillary Clinton formally conceding and congratulating him on his victory. And then, of course, immediately after, she gave a press conference publicly formally conceding the election. Again, Hillary Clinton is just morally and ethically and civically superior by far to Donald Trump. She did everything right. Donald Trump did everything wrong. And as the sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump had a greater responsibility to respect the outcome of a free and fair election than a private citizen like Hillary Clinton. And she still did the right thing, and he still failed. I love the fact, I love rubbing this in MAGA's faces. It's so fun because they're just, they have adopted an unwinnable, untenable position on this issue. They will always lose no matter what the parameter or what the angle. It's fun to rub that in their faces. Another clip.
Immigration. All right. Last night, J.D. Vance said immigrants have, quote, destroyed Americans' lives in Springfield before having his mic cut. But all of this got started when Trump falsely claimed at last month's debate that Haitian migrants were eating pets. The governor of Ohio, the mayor of Springfield have both come out and said this is not true. Corey, can you say that Haitian migrants are not eating pets in Springfield? Can you say that?
You know what I can say, Jim? I can say that 13,099 murderers were let into this country, 16,000 rapists, 425,000 people in the last 4 years have been let into this country by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's own Customs and Border Protection that are running around this country, Jim.
The other thing, too, it's Kamala Harris.
Crimes.
I don't know. Why do you guys say Kamala? That is, it's Kamala Harris.
Jim, we know that they're committing crimes against Americans. Why can't these individuals talk about the individual?
So let's just pause here for just a second, because again, we talked about this in a previous video, but of course Lewandowski is lying, as MAGA Republicans are wont to do. This was fact-checked again. The 13,999 number is wildly misconstrued. Many people on that list entered the country generations ago, and some are actively serving life sentences. They are on ICE's non-detained list because they're not detained by ICE. Others left prison years ago but can't be deported. So again, when Lewandowski says 13,000, migrants who committed homicide were let into this country in the last 4 years under the Biden-Harris administration, that is a flat-out, unambiguous, blatant lie. As a matter of fact, many of those entered the country under the Trump administration, under Lewandowski's cult leader. So again, just a blatant lie trying to demonize immigrants, trying to demagogue this issue when in fact they have an objectively worse record, they being the Trump administration, than the Biden-Harris administration on this issue. There was a greater expansion under the Trump administration than there was under the Biden-Harris administration with respect to the number of these migrants who have committed homicide. There was like a 10% increase during the Trump administration compared to 5% so far under the Biden-Harris administration. So again, they're just dead wrong on the facts, to say nothing again of the despicable, inexcusable bigotry that they're peddling, not only by lying about these statistics, but also with the conspiracy theories about Haitian migrants eating cats and dogs, which has contributed, by the way, to bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio.
Individuals who've been killed by illegal immigrants. 13,099 murderers have been let into this country by this administration's own accounting, and you guys don't want to talk about it. To put that in perspective,
Corey, we talk
for your
about
viewers,
immigration all the time.
Yeah,
we talk about this all the time.
Jim, admit that 13,099 murders have been let into this country. That's
Corey,
4 murderers for every single county in America. You don't think that
Corey,
that's a problem?
Border crossings are down and crime is down in this country. But
crime is not down in this country. The FBI
I asked you at the
lied,
beginning
Jim,
of this
that.
interview, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? I just asked you whether Haitian migrants are eating dogs and cats in Springfield. You won't admit the truth on either of those questions. I want to ask you about something that
13.
So again, Corey Lewandowski is lying on this. The FBI crime statistics cover 94% of the American population. They involve comprehensive data streams and data analyses and submission from multiple sources, including local law enforcement. Violent crime is down in this country. That is a fact, and Republicans have no evidence to the contrary besides their feelings. And I regret to say, facts don't care about your feelings, according to Ben Shapiro.
1,000 murderers have come into the country?
The 13,000 number is false, by the way. The 13,000 number is false.
Why is it false, Jim? If the government's own data says that, CBP's own data put this out last week. So why do you say it's false if the government put out? By the way, this is the Biden-Harris administration who put out.
The
So
government
why is it
also
false?
says border crossings are down.
But Jim, you just said that was a false number. How do you get to that? What data do you have that says Customs and Border Protection is wrong?
Yeah, I also want to ask you about something that
No, but
Trump
Jim, you just said it was wrong.
That is over several administrations, Corey. That number is over several administrations.
How many?
Corey, well, why don't you tell me, since you seem to have command of that fact?
I have command of what they put out, which is 13,099 murderers have been.
Again, the report did not say that 13,099 murderers were entered the country under the Biden-Harris administration. They're saying that's how many migrants who have committed homicide are in this country who are not currently being detained by ICE that they're not being detained by ICE because they've already served their prison sentences. They're currently serving prison sentences. They're just not being detained by ICE. And this was over the span of multiple administrations going back potentially generations. So again, Corey Lewandowski is just straight up lying about that information. I want to play one more clip. This pretty brutal exchange between Lewandowski and Jim Acosta. Actually, we got it right here. Almost repeated the second clip.
It goes to show you the politics of the top of the administration, whether it's Mayorkas or it's Kamala or it's Joe Biden. Donald Trump should have had additional resources.
What is this Kamala? It's Kamala Harris. Corey, you've been in this business a long time. I think you're a mature grown-up. It's Kamala Harris. Can you just say Kamala, or you cannot say Kamala?
Jim, can you admit 13,099 murders that have come into the country? You say you haven't.
Well, Corey, I appreciate you coming on. Maybe we'll have you back. Thanks for your time. All right.
So again, he refuses to say the vice president's name correctly. Obviously, it's not because he's stupid. It's just because he's racist and he doesn't want to respect how the vice president's name is actually pronounced. He's still peddling the lie about the 13,099 immigrants, suggesting that all of them entered the country under the Biden-Harris administration. Again, it's not true. So what this goes to show is exactly what we need to see from CNN hosts, or really just the media in general, when confronting MAGA Republicans, is they need to establish a baseline of credibility, particularly when it's something as important as democracy. So I think, as David Pakman used to do when he would interview MAGA Republicans, asking them who won the 2020 election is a perfectly important question to ask and demand an answer of before we move on to anything. I think it's fair if you want to give them time to make their criticisms of the Biden-Harris administration. That's perfectly fair. You should do that. And then if they're wrong, of course, refute it in real time. But I think it's perfectly fair to say, hey, before we get started, given the pervasive lies coming from Donald Trump on this issue, and given that this is a bigger issue by far than any of the others, since we can't have a functioning democracy or resolve issues with the economy and immigration if we don't have constitutional order, who won the 2020 election? The fact that Lewandowski was too afraid to answer the question was perfect grounds for Jim Acosta to basically just keep on that issue, or on the conspiracy theories about Haitian migrants eating cats and dogs, to establish a baseline before they moved on to anything else. And when he refused to do so, Jim Acosta rightly ended the interview, humiliating Corey Lewandowski and failing to give him an opportunity to make his case for Donald Trump. This is how the media should respond responsibly, at least in my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments.